Hi, I'm Heidi Shorts. Welcome to a new creative lettering art lesson. In God's Runaway, we saw how Jonah was disobedient. He didn't want to go to Nineveh as God had asked him to do. He took matters in his own hands and he ran away. As we see from the story of Jonah, he was eventually swallowed by a big fish. Can you imagine how big a fish would have to be to swallow a man? Well, some people think that it must have been a whale, because that's one of the largest sea creatures that we can imagine. As we think about Jonah's disobedience to God and how he was swallowed by this creature of the deep, we will begin a new lettering lesson. In our past lessons, we've looked at some ways to make the letters themselves look creative, the way they were decorated by the way they were formed. Today, we'll focus more on simple letters, but using illustration around those letters to help tell a story. The word we will use for this story in this lesson is obey, since this is what God wanted Jonah to do. The illustrations will be fairly simple, more cartoon-like, less like a realistic drawing. But before we start, let's make sure that we have our supplies. We'll need to have some regular white paper, the kind that you've been using for other lessons. Something from your computer printer would be just great. You'll need to have a number 2 pencil. You'll need to have an eraser. A good white eraser is just perfect for making corrections and additions. You'll also need a pencil sharpener. You'll need to have a ruler. Colored pencils, lots of different colors. Doesn't matter what brand, what kind, they'll work well. And you'll also need some extreme colors. We'll be using a lot of these today. These are the kind that we'll be using with our black light. And if you don't have one, you can go to seethelightshine.com to get one of your own. You now have all your supplies and we're ready to get started. We're going to start out with your number 2 pencil, your piece of paper, and your ruler. Your paper will be landscape style, sideways in front of you. Go ahead and take your ruler and your number 2 pencil. I'm going to go ahead and use a darker pencil so that you can see that at home. But for you, you want to make sure you have nice light lines, nice light guidelines so that you can see where to place the different elements that you'll be using in today's lesson. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up on my paper. Matter of fact, I'm going to start over here to the left. I'm going to trace along the top edge of my ruler and along the bottom edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and scoot my ruler over a little ways so that I can extend those lines and make them a little bit longer. These lines really help me to make sure that my letters, my illustrations, anything that I'm doing is consistent. And now you're done with your ruler. You don't need it anymore. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this strip that we've just created and we are going to begin some illustrations. We're going to do it 3 different times because we're going to have 3 different options, ways to insert our lettering into our illustrations. We're going to start over here on the left. And we're going to start with a shape that looks kind of like a football, or maybe like an almond. And I'm going to start in the middle, about halfway between my 2 lines, and I'm going to make an arch that comes up and touches my top line, and then comes down about halfway, again, between my 2 lines. Then I'm going to make the opposite. I'm going to make an arch upside down, touching my first spot and ending with the one that I had just created. I now have kind of a football or kind of an almond shape. I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to duplicate it, do the same thing in the middle of my line. Arch up and over and under and over. And then I'm going to come way over here to the right-hand side and I'm going to do it again. Up and over and down and over. Okay? I'm going to be completing, as I mentioned, the same thing 3 different times, but I will be making some small adjustments as we go, and you'll see what I mean. Part 2, we're going to take the back end of this football, and we're going to make a scoop that looks kind of like the letter U. I'm going to start at the top of my football shape, come down, over, like this. And you can see how it kind of mimics a U. I'm going to come back over here, do the same thing, U. Over to this one on the right, over to the side, and a U. Okay? You are now starting to create a whale, believe it or not. Let's take a look and see what our next step is going to be. Now we're going to go underneath our whale. We're going to make another line that's going to connect the one that we've just created. We're going to start down here at the bottom. We're going to reach over here and come up so that this curved line is up about as high as the first line that we created. We're going to come over here and do the same thing with this whale, across and up so that they're even, and this one across and over so that they're even. Now it doesn't look so much like a whale yet, but the next element will really make this start to take some shape. We're going to make what look like two leaves, and we're going to connect them at one point. We're going to start here, we're going to make a leaf shape here, and then connected, we're going to make another leaf shape here. And you can see how they, instead of growing up, they are growing apart, which makes the look of a whale's tail. Let's come on over here, do the same thing, kind of a leaf shape, come back, and another one, and join together. And the same thing on this side. Okay, starting to look a little more whale-like. Now let's give him some more personality. We need to give this big guy a mouth. So we're going to start over here where these two lines join together. I'm going to reach across, I'm going to come down and then up slightly. It's a pretty big mouth. And over here, where I start to scoop back up, I'm going to add a circle, which will represent his eye. Now, if any point I'm going a little too quickly for you, you may turn off your video and take your time to complete some of the steps that I'm showing you. Let's come across here and slightly up, circle for an eye, and the same thing here. Now, we want to give this guy a fin. Let's come back over here behind his mouth, give him a fin, and I'm noticing that we've got some lines that we're running into. Not a problem. You'll get a chance to go ahead and erase those in a few minutes because you're not going to want those in your completed whales. Now, one other thing I want you to do, we are going to leave these two whales as they are, but this guy we're going to change a little bit. We're going to take his mouth, and this end right here we're going to connect back over here to the front so it actually looks like his mouth is open. Okay? You have your three whales in place. We have some basic shapes. Now it's time for us to start adding a little bit more of our illustration and be able to start adding the word obey, sticking that in our picture and having it come to life. Now, when I think of a whale, I often think of his blowhole and I think of the water spraying from the top. So on this guy, I'm going to give myself a little spray coming out the top of his head. Same thing here, a little spout here, and some wavy lines just to give the suggestion that he's spraying some water. Okay, so all three now have that, and I'm actually going to put a couple of water drops on all of these. So we have the main part of the spray, and then we've got some extra little drops coming off the sides. Okay, nice job. Now, let's put our word obey. In this first illustration, I'm going to take my letters, and as I mentioned earlier, these are simple letters. Most of the fun and most of the message is in the picture rather than in the way the words are created. So I'm going to take my word obey, very simple capital letters, and I'm going to inject that into this part of my picture. I'm putting my message right in the spray that's coming out of the top of my whale. And I've got an exclamation point because it's important that Jonah obeys. So here we go. We've got obey here. Now, over on this one, we've already put obey in the water. Where else can we put it? Well, how about the water that the fish or the whale is swimming in? Let's go ahead and add some waves. And then we're going to write the word obey in the waves. Okay, as you notice, with this whale, we took the word obey, we put it in the water that's coming out of his spout. In this whale, we've put the word obey under the water to mimic the waves that are crashing around him. In this whale, instead of putting it in the water in either place, we're going to take that word and we're going to be putting it in his mouth. Kind of makes us think about Jonah being swallowed by this whale. Let's take the letters. Here, they're angled slightly this way with the waves. And here we're going to turn them the opposite direction, and they're going to be facing the whale as if they're going into the whale. We'll take our O. We're going to touch the top and the bottom of his mouth. The B, the E, ooh, they're getting smaller, and the Y. And you can see how it looks like he's even eating those words. Now I can put the water around him. I don't want my water to go across my word because it'll be hard to read, but I can go back behind him as well. Now, one other thing I want to add, because I do want him really to look more like a whale, let's go ahead and add some ribbing underneath his mouth, kind of the same direction as this word obey. I'm going to do it lightly here. I don't want to run into my letters because I want to be able to see them. And then here we have some more. Okay, so we have 3 different ways for us to take the same illustration and then take the word obey, interject it into our picture, make it a little more fun to read, and yet we still have the same message coming across. Well, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it's time to get rid of some of my guidelines. I want to get rid of these straight lines, some of these lines here that cross my whale and the water where it's kind of confusing, and I want to start to add some color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some nice, bright, extreme colors, take some orange so that I have a nice bright message, because actually, remember, this is the part that's most important in a lettering lesson. We want the letters to show up. So we'll take orange, nice and bright, over our letters. Okay, we'll be using a regular, kind of a dark blue pencil to give us the feel of our waves, to help us outline the water that's coming up out of the whale. And then we're going to take this pencil and we're going to put it away. Now you'll want to pick it up later, you'll want to pick up your orange later as you complete the rest of your whales. But I'm just giving you a few ideas on this very first illustration. So I'm putting this one down and I'm going to go to my extreme colors. And what I want this time are my blues and my greens. And I'm going to be using these to do what we call kind of a cross hatch across the whale's leathery skin. We're going to go one direction with one color and then across with that same color. Can you see how it's starting to add some dimension to his skin? Then I can go over that with some blue, or absolute zero as this one is called. And you can see how I'm starting to give him some more personality. And then I can go back to my lighter green. This one is Arctic lime and really make him stand out. And then we can go back and we can add some of these greens and some of these blues to the water. And we don't want to forget we can do our water drops as well. Now let me show you what this looks like when it's completely in color. You can see how I've erased my guidelines. I've taken out all the lines that compete and make it hard to read. Of course, we want to be able to read this, so we get rid of those. And then after I made sure that I had lots of color in my picture, I went back in with a regular black colored pencil, and I just outlined slightly so that I could bring in a little more detail to my whale. I went over this ribbing underneath. I want to make sure he's got a nice dark eye. And actually, I can take this at this point as well and come back in and give a little more detail to my water. And if I want to, I can go around my letters and make them stand out even more. Remember, this is more of a cartoonish picture rather than a realistic drawing of whales, and also very simple shapes in our letters. You think obey is big enough? You think we get the message here? So we have created 3 different whales. We've used the word obey, and obey 3 different places and 3 different ways to get our message across. Now it's time to put away your pencil. Let's get out our black light. Let's take a look at our completed artwork and see what it looks like. Just as you've placed the word obey into your illustrations, think of how you can place the Word of God into your life in ways that others can see. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you soon for another Creative Lettering Art Lesson.